Education should be all about empowerment. It is about having students feel successful and capable. Schools need to validate student backgrounds and make a child's reality the focal point of their education. I know, as a teacher, that I have an opportunity to shape the way my students perceive themselves and the world around them. Many of my students don't like school and don't feel welcomed in it. Most of them don't know that, historically speaking, they were never meant to succeed in these institutions. As a first-year teacher, my teaching abilities are still growing, but my ideal is to construct a classroom that inspires revolutionaries. Their acts of rebellion would be to be successful, because by doing that, they are disrupting a system that was never designed to help them succeed. Respect is the very foundation of a successful classroom. There must be mutual respect between the teacher and amongst the students in order to nurture relationships. When you create a safe space, students are more comfortable taking risks and letting their imaginations run wild.
How have you observed Miss Diaz show respect in her classroom?
Well, she shows respect to everyone, and when they're disrespectful, she actually takes her time and sits right next to you and actually talks to you about it. She gives you chances and everything.
Thinking about respect and how I daily observe it in her classroom, it is really clear from the moment the students walk in that they feel comfortable and welcome in an environment where they can be goofy and silly and themselves, where they also feel confident in taking risks academically and sharing their ideas even if they're not 100% sure that they're going to be correct, and then in giving each other feedback when they see errors in other students' work, and doing it in a way that is that builds a lot of community in the classroom and in a way that promotes learning on a deeper level than I think any first-year teacher could possibly achieve.
According to Paulo Freire, what the educator does in teaching is to make it possible for the students to become themselves. And although teaching can be very formulaic at times, my goal is to get students to think critically about the material I present to them. Too often, students are not taught to think, whether at school or at home, and it is my vision to improve my instruction so that students are constantly questioning the status quo, their own beliefs, and the circumstances that they live in.
Just at the beginning of the year, it was really apparent that she had a, a general interest in not just being a math teacher, which she's done an exceptional job at, but in being an agent for change in her kids' lives. She right away jumped into being a mentor for one of her students, and it has made such an impact on that student's day-to-day performance in math class, but also in reading and writing and the student's behavior and participation in school, which speaks volumes about Brisa's commitment to education as a mode of social justice and change in our community. She's really become a strong advocate for students and a voice of reason and equity in our building here at Everett.
What do you like about Miss Diaz's class?
Miss Diaz is very nice, and she's like one of the best teachers I've ever had, and she makes math a lot like more fun and interesting, and I like her.
What?
As a college-educated Latina, I see it as my duty to advocate for my community and for others that are hurting like mine. Because of my personal background, I believe that advocacy is not about charity or doing a favor for somebody because you feel sorry for them. Advocacy is about giving all people access to a great education. It is about being able to have an honest conversation, the kind that inspire kids to meet high expectations. Advocacy is about empowering women, people of color, those that identify as LGBTQ, and any other member of a marginalized group to lead the life they want to lead.
In terms of advocacy, what stands out to me is the way that she's built relationships with some of her toughest students, and I mean all students, but like in particular the students who have struggled to pull themselves together academically and personally in one of the toughest years of anyone's life in 7th grade. Just taking a stance that it's not okay for me just to provide education to you in terms of mastering 7th grade standards, but it's key that I'm going to go beyond that to be in constant communication with parents, to be talking with those students regularly about the way in which they bring themselves to the classroom, the way in which they act in a classroom, correcting those behaviors so that they're able to hold themselves to high expectations in the future.
Leadership is necessary in education because there is too much at stake for us to be passive. When people talk about the state of education in California, the first thing that comes to mind are my students. The issue becomes really real when I think about their futures and how difficult it will probably be for some of them to graduate high school, get a job, and not only apply to college, but to also navigate the bureaucracy that comes with it. The future of these children cannot be left to chance. It takes a broad network of leaders to make educational reform a reality. By becoming a teacher and a leader in my classroom, I feel like I have taken my first step towards creating real change.
She's been co-teaching for about half of this year, and she has taken on a really cool leadership role within that partnership since the other teacher came into her classroom, and I think she's made that partnership a lot stronger than it would have been if she hadn't been so collaborative. And then as for next year, this year I was the instructional leadership team for 7th grade, and having been familiar with the job and knowing that Brisa always carries through with her responsibilities and commitments, I think that she would be an excellent person to take over that role next year.
As I reflect on my first year of teaching, I feel like one of my biggest successes is the relationships I develop with my kids. That, by far, has been the best part of teaching. Most of all, it's just the fact that I had fun with my kids. That was generally my biggest success. In terms of challenges, my biggest challenge was working with students that were behaviorally difficult. My behavior management skills are still evolving and improving. It's still an ongoing challenge as I continue to learn best practices and ways to get all of my students invested in getting their education. In terms of what I have learned to better prepare myself for next year, the biggest lesson I have learned is to take care of myself. I cannot be an advocate for others if I do not take care of myself first.